The rejection ceremony was supposed to be the greatest moment of her life. Every unmated woman in the realm dreamed of standing where Azenor stood now, before the Alpha King himself, recognized as his fated mate by the sacred moon bond. But Saurin wasn't looking at her with love. He was looking at her with nothing. Cold, empty, absolute nothing. I, Saurin Valdric, Alpha King of Thornhaven, reject you, Azenor of the Hollow Bloodline, as my mate and Luna. The words struck her like physical blows. The great hall erupted in gasps and whispers. 1,000 faces stared at her, some shocked, most satisfied. She was the daughter of traitors, after all. A woman from a bloodline so disgraced that even speaking their name invited misfortune. Of course, the king would reject her. Of course, the moon goddess had been cruel enough to bind her to someone who would never want her. Azenor didn't cry. She'd learned long ago that tears only invited more cruelty. She simply bowed her head and walked out of that hall, while the court whispered and laughed behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't see Saurin's hand fly to his chest the moment she crossed the threshold. She didn't hear his wolf howl in agony inside him, clawing at his ribs, trying to follow her. She didn't know that by rejecting his true mate, the Alpha King had just signed his own death sentence. 6 months later, he found her. Pale, weakened, desperate, and nothing like the cold king who had shattered her before everyone she knew. He offered her everything: protection, wealth, the title of Luna Queen. Everything except the one thing she'd never dared to hope for. I will bond with you, he said. I will give you the world, but I will never love you. Neither of them understood how impossible that promise would be. The village of Brindlemark sat at the edge of the kingdom, where the forests grew so thick that sunlight barely touched the ground. It was the kind of place people came to disappear. And for the past 6 months, Azenor had done exactly that. She woke before dawn, as she always did, to begin her work at the healer's cottage. Mistress Oda was old and half-blind, but she paid fairly and asked no questions, 2 qualities Azenor valued more than gold. The work was simple: grinding herbs, mixing poultices, cleaning wounds. Nothing that required her to speak to anyone or explain why a young woman with noble bearing had appeared in their village with nothing but the clothes on her back. Azenor tied her dark hair back and caught her reflection in the water basin. She looked different now. Thinner, harder. The softness that had once made her mother call her beautiful had been carved away by hunger and humiliation. Good, she thought. Beauty had never brought her anything but pain. The memory came unbidden, as it always did. The great hall of Thornhaven, the 1,000 candles burning. The way her heart had raced when the Moon Oracle announced that the Alpha King's fated mate had been found. The way that hope, stupid, desperate hope, had bloomed in her chest when the Oracle spoke her name. Azenor of the Hollow Bloodline, the mate of Saurin Valdric. For one shining moment she had believed that everything might be different, that the curse of her family name might finally be broken, that the goddess had seen fit to give her a chance at happiness despite everything. Then she had seen the look on Saurin's face. Disgust. Cold, unmistakable disgust. He had stared at her as if she were something rotting, something that had crawled out of the mud to soil his perfect court. And when he spoke the rejection, his voice had carried no hesitation at all. The memory still burned. Azenor shook it away and focused on the herbs before her. The past was dead. Only survival mattered now. The morning passed quietly. Mistress Oda tended to a farmer with a festering cut, while Azenor restocked the shelves. By midday, she was hanging bundles of dried rosemary when the cottage door burst open. "Riders!" the blacksmith's son gasped, "coming through the northern pass, at least 20. They're carrying the king's banner." Azenor's blood went cold. "What business does the king have in Brindlemark?" Mistress Oda muttered. But Aznor already knew. She could feel it in her bones, in the strange pull that had never quite faded despite the rejection. He was here. She didn't know how. She didn't know why. But she knew. She was out the back door before anyone could stop her. The forest swallowed her within seconds. She ran without direction, without thought, guided only by the desperate need to escape. Branches tore at her clothes and scratched her face. Her lungs burned. But she kept running until she burst into a clearing and stopped. He was already there, waiting for her, as if he had known exactly where she would run. Saurin Valdric sat astride a black war horse, his royal guard spread behind him in a silent line. But he looked nothing like the cold, perfect king who had rejected her. His skin was ashen. Dark circles ringed his storm-colored eyes. His cheekbones stood out too sharply, as if he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. And even from this distance she could feel something wrong, a cold radiating from him that had nothing to do with the weather, as if winter itself lived beneath his skin. Beneath his controlled exterior she sensed something else, something wild and desperate clawing at the edges of his composure. His wolf. She could almost hear it howling, could almost feel its desperation bleeding through the air between them. And when he looked at her, there was something in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Desperation. "Found you," he said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Azenor's hands trembled at her sides. "You shouldn't be here." "No," he agreed. "I shouldn't." He dismounted slowly, carefully, as if the movement cost him more effort than it should. When his boots touched the ground, he swayed slightly before steadying himself. "But it seems I have no choice." "What do you want?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Haven't you taken enough from me?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or guilt. But it was gone before she could name it. "I need you, Azenor." She laughed. A harsh, bitter sound that didn't feel like it belonged to her. "You rejected me. In front of the entire kingdom. You called me hollow. Unworthy. You said the goddess herself must have made a mistake binding you to someone like me. I know what I said. Then you know I owe you nothing." Saurin took a step toward her, then another. His guards shifted uneasily but didn't follow. Up close she could see the tremor in his hands, the slight sheen of sweat on his brow. He looked like a man standing at the edge of death. "When an alpha rejects his true mate," he said quietly, "his wolf begins to die. It's an old curse, one I didn't believe until I felt it myself." He pressed a hand to his chest. "My wolf has been tearing itself apart for 6 months. It refuses to eat, refuses to shift, refuses to accept any other bond. The healers say I have weeks left. Maybe days." Azenor stared at him. "And you want me to save you?" "Yes." "Why would I do that? After everything you did?" Saurin held her gaze. In his silver-gray eyes she saw something she hadn't expected. Honesty. "Because I'll give you everything. The title of Luna Queen, the protection of the crown. Wealth, power, anything you desire." He paused. "I'll give you everything except love. That's the one thing I cannot offer." "Why not?" But he didn't answer. The king's camp had been established in a clearing a mile from Brindlemark. It was modest by royal standards. A handful of tents, a small fire, and guards positioned at the perimeter. Azenor followed in silence, flanked by 2 soldiers who watched her as if she might bolt at any moment. They weren't wrong to worry. The central tent was larger than the others, its entrance marked by the silver wolf banner of Thornhaven. Saurin held the flap open and gestured for her to enter. His movements were stiff, careful, like a man managing constant pain. Inside, the tent was sparsely furnished, a table covered in maps, a simple cot. A chair where, Azenor noticed, a healer's kit sat half open, its contents depleted. Whatever was happening to him, he'd been fighting it for some time. "Sit," Saurin said, lowering himself into the chair across from her with visible relief. When his hand brushed the table's surface, she noticed frost forming briefly on the wood where he touched it, there and gone so quickly she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Please." Aznor remained standing. "Explain." He studied her for a long moment. "You've grown harder. You gave me no choice." If the words stung, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and began. "The curse of the rejected mate is ancient. It predates the kingdoms, the pacts, even the written histories. When the moon goddess binds two souls, she does not do so lightly. To reject that bond is to reject her gift." He looked down at his hands. "The punishment falls on the one who rejects. The wolf, which is the purest part of us, cannot accept the violation. It begins to consume itself." "And there's no cure?" "Only one. The rejected mate must willingly accept the bond despite the rejection. A true acceptance, freely given. Nothing forced or coerced will work." His winter eyes met hers. "That's why I'm asking, Azenor. Not commanding. Asking." She let the silence stretch between them. Part of her wanted to refuse out of pure spite. Let him suffer. Let him feel a fraction of the humiliation and pain he had inflicted on her. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, understood something he wasn't saying. "You chose to reject me," she said slowly. "You knew the curse existed. You knew what would happen. And you rejected me anyway." She tilted her head. "Why would anyone choose death over a bond with their fated mate?" Saurin's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern. If you want me to save your life, it absolutely is my concern." For a moment she thought he might refuse, but then his shoulders sagged, and he looked suddenly exhausted. Not just physically, exhausted in his soul. "There are politics you don't understand," he said. "Powers within the court that would have used our bond to destroy everything I've built. Taking a mate from the hollow bloodline would have given my enemies exactly what they needed to challenge my rule. Civil war would have followed. Thousands would have died." He paused. "I made a calculation. Your suffering against the suffering of thousands. It seemed clear at the time. And now? Now I'm dying. And my brother stands ready to take the throne." His voice hardened. "Vandress has no interest in peace. He's been waiting for this opportunity for years. If I die without an heir, without a Luna to strengthen the succession, everything falls apart anyway." Azenor processed this slowly. He hadn't rejected her out of cruelty alone. There had been reasons, calculated and cold, but reasons nonetheless. It didn't erase the pain. Nothing could erase that. But it altered something inside her. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. Saurin leaned forward. "A true bond, a legal marriage. The title of Luna Queen with all the rights and protections that entails. Your bloodline will be restored to honor. Your family's lands and titles returned. You will want for nothing. And in return, you accept the bond. You give me an heir to secure the succession, and you stand beside me in public as my queen." He hesitated. "In private, we will live separately. I won't burden you with expectations of affection. This will be an arrangement. Nothing more." "You said you can't love me. Why not?" Again, that flicker in his eyes, that carefully hidden pain. "Because I can't," he said simply. "Not you. Not anyone. Love is not something I'm capable of. Accept that now, and we can proceed. Expect more, and you'll only hurt yourself." Azenor stared at him, this broken king with his desperate bargain. 6 months ago, he had held all the power. Now he knelt before her, figuratively, if not literally, begging for salvation. She should refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. But she thought of Brindlemark, of Mistress Oda's cottage, of the endless days of grinding herbs and hiding from her own name. She thought of her father, dead in a prison cell, killed by the shame her rejection had brought on an already disgraced family. Her mother, wasting away from grief in a village that wouldn't even speak to her. Her younger sister Neve, married off to a cruel lord to pay family debts because no one would offer for a hollow girl otherwise. The hollow bloodline had nothing left to lose. "I accept," she heard herself say. "Your arrangement, your terms, all of it." Something changed in Saurin's expression. Relief, yes, but something else too. Something almost like regret. "Then we leave for Thornhaven at dawn. The bonding ceremony will take place at the next full moon, 12 days from now." He rose, steadier now, as if her acceptance alone had strengthened him. "You'll have chambers in the East Wing. Servants, guards, anything you require." Azenor nodded, still not quite believing what she'd agreed to. Saurin was halfway to the tent entrance when a new voice cut through the night air. "Well, isn't this touching?" A woman entered, brushing past the guards as if they were furniture. She was beautiful, stunning, really, with silver blonde hair and eyes the color of a winter sky. She wore riding clothes of the finest quality, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. "Lisara," Saurin's voice went flat. "What are you doing here?" The woman, Lisara, smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Her gaze slid to Azenor, appraising her like livestock at market. "I heard you finally crawled out of your sickbed to find your little reject." She stepped closer to Azenor, circling her slowly. My, this is what almost killed you? How disappointing." "Leave," Saurin commanded. "Oh, I'll go." Lisara paused at the tent's entrance, looking back over her shoulder. Her smile widened. "But I thought your future Luna should know something first." Her gaze locked with Azenor's. "He didn't reject you because of politics, sweetheart. He rejected you because he was already promised to me. And whatever little arrangement you've made?" She laughed softly. "It won't change what he really is. Ask him about the Crimson Vow sometime. Ask him what he sacrificed to make it." Then she was gone, her laughter echoing into the night. Azenor turned to Saurin. His face had gone pale, paler than before, if that was possible. "What is the Crimson Vow?" He didn't answer. The journey to Thornhaven took 3 days. The full moon was 12 days away, leaving just over a week of preparation before the bonding ceremony. 3 days of riding in near silence, surrounded by soldiers who looked at Azenor with barely concealed suspicion. 3 days of watching Saurin grow weaker despite her acceptance, though the deterioration seemed to have slowed. 3 days of wondering what she had truly agreed to. The Crimson Vow. The words haunted her. She had asked Saurin about it repeatedly, but he refused to answer. Each time she pressed, his expression shuttered completely, and he changed the subject or simply walked away. Whatever it was, he would rather die than explain it. The capital city rose before them on the 4th morning. Thornhaven sat atop a massive cliff overlooking the sea, its towers carved from black stone that gleamed in the sunlight. It was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, a fortress that had never been conquered in 1,000 years of wars, and now it would be her home. The gates opened at their approach, and the streets filled with onlookers as the royal procession passed. Azenor kept her hood raised, but it didn't matter. The whispers reached her anyway. "Is that her? The rejected one? He actually brought her back? Has he lost his mind? Hollow blood in the palace. The goddess must be weeping." Azenor kept her spine straight and her eyes forward. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. The palace itself was overwhelming. Corridors that seemed to stretch forever, lined with portraits of kings and queens stretching back generations. Servants who bowed but wouldn't meet her eyes. guards who tracked her every movement with silent hostility. Her chambers, at least, were private. A suite of rooms in the east wing, just as Saurin had promised. They were beautiful. Rich fabrics, a canopied bed, and a fireplace large enough to stand in. But they felt like a gilded cage. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter." A young woman stepped inside, head bowed. She was small and unassuming, with dark hair pinned back simply. But there was something in the way she held herself, a stillness, a watchfulness that suggested more than met the eye. "I'm Helene, Your Highness. I've been assigned as your personal maid." "Highness?" Azenor almost laughed. "I'm not a princess yet." "You will be by the next full moon." Helene's voice was soft but steady. "In Thornhaven, we honor what people will become, not only what they are." There was something in the way she said it, a quiet defiance, that made Azenor look at her more closely. "You're not afraid of me." "Should I be? Everyone else seems to think so." Helene finally looked up, and Azenor saw intelligence in those dark eyes. "Everyone else didn't spend 3 years serving the previous Luna before she died. I've seen real monsters, Highness. You're not one of them." Before Azenor could respond, another knock sounded. This one was harder, more commanding. "The king requests your presence in the throne room," a guard announced through the door. "The formal presentation will begin within the hour." Azenor's stomach dropped. "Formal presentation?" Helene was already moving toward the wardrobe. "You'll be presented to the court as the future Luna Queen. It's tradition." She pulled out a gown of deep emerald silk. "We should hurry." The throne room was vast. Pillars of black marble rose toward a ceiling painted with scenes of wolf hunts and ancient battles. Hundreds of nobles filled the space, their finest clothes glittering with jewels and gold. And at the far end, seated on a throne of carved obsidian, was Saurin. He looked better today. Color had returned to his cheeks, and he sat with the rigid posture of a king rather than a dying man. But his eyes, when they found her across the room, still held that haunted quality. Azenor walked the long aisle alone. Every step felt like a mile, every whisper cut like a blade. Look at her, acting like she belongs here. The hollow bloodline on the queen's throne, our ancestors would weep. He must be truly desperate. She reached the foot of the throne and sank into a curtsy, keeping her head bowed. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then Saurin spoke. "Rise, Azenor of House Valdric." The murmurs erupted instantly. House Valdric. He had just claimed her into his own bloodline, erasing her disgraced family name in a single sentence. It was more than tradition required. Far more. Her new name, her legal protection. But she knew the whispers would still call her hollow. Some stains couldn't be erased by royal decree, only by proving them wrong. Azenor rose slowly, her eyes finding his. He gave her nothing. No warmth, no explanation, but he had just done something no one expected. "This woman has been chosen by the moon goddess as my fated mate," Saurin continued, his voice carrying through the hall. "In 9 days she will be bonded to me as Luna Queen. Any who question this decision question the goddess herself." More whispers. Angry ones this time, but no one dared speak aloud. Then a voice cut through the tension. "And what of the crimson vow, brother?" Azenor's head snapped toward the speaker. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair as Saurin but crueler features. His smile was a wolf's smile, all teeth and hunger. "Vandress," Saurin said flatly, "this isn't the time." "Isn't it?" Vandress spread his hands. "The court deserves to know. You made a blood oath, Saurin. Unbreakable, binding, and now you're taking a different mate?" He laughed. "The goddess isn't the only one who might object." The throne room had gone deathly silent. Saurin stood slowly. Even weakened, his presence filled the room like a physical weight. "The crimson vow is my burden to bear, Not yours, not the court's, mine. And when it kills you, Vandress pressed, when the vow takes what it's owed? What then, brother? Who protects your precious hollow bride? Saurin descended the steps until he stood face to face with Vandress. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner. If I die, Vandress, it won't be you who takes the throne. I'll make certain of that. The brothers stared at each other for a long moment. Then Vandress smiled, bowed mockingly, and melted back into the crowd. Saurin turned to Azenor. For just a moment she saw something crack through his composure. Fear. Genuine fear. We need to talk, he said quietly. Tonight. In private. The ceremony continued, but Azenor barely heard it. Her mind was spinning with questions, each one more terrifying than the last. What was the Crimson Vow? What had Saurin promised? And why did his own brother seem so certain it would destroy them both? She was still searching for answers when Helene appeared at her elbow hours later, face pale. Highness, you need to see something. Her voice trembled. It's about the previous Luna, about how she really died. Helene led her through corridors that grew progressively darker and less maintained. The polished marble gave way to rough stone. The elegant tapestries disappeared, replaced by bare walls stained with age. They were descending into the oldest part of the palace, the parts that existed before Thornhaven became a kingdom. Where are we going? Azenor whispered. The archive vaults, where they keep the records they don't want anyone to find. Helene's voice was barely audible. I served Lady Mirae for 3 years. She was kind. Good. And they said she died of a wasting sickness. But I was there, Highness. I saw what really happened. They stopped before a heavy iron door. Helene produced a key, old, rusted, clearly stolen, and worked it into the lock. Why show me this? Helene paused, her hand on the door. Because you're about to bond with the king, and you deserve to know what that bond might cost you. The door groaned open. Inside was a small chamber filled with shelves of scrolls and leather-bound books. Dust coated everything. Helene moved with purpose, pulling a specific volume from a shelf near the back. Lady Mirae kept a journal. The official one was destroyed after her death, but she gave me this. She pressed the book into Azenor's hands. Read the final entries, then decide if you still want to go through with the bonding. Azenor opened the journal. The handwriting was elegant but increasingly erratic toward the end. Day 892 of my bonding to Saurin. He came to my chambers again last night. Not for affection, never for that, but to check on my health. The healers say the baby is growing well. I should be happy. I am carrying the heir to Thornhaven, but I see the way he looks at me, and I know the truth. He feels nothing. Not for me, not for our child. The Crimson Vow took everything from him. Azenor's hands trembled as she turned the page. Day 901. I finally understand. The vow wasn't just a promise to Lisara's family, it was a blood sacrifice. A piece of his soul, given freely in exchange for power. The ability to feel love, to form true emotional bonds. He traded it away when he was barely 17. His father demanded it, said a king who could love was a king who could be manipulated. Saurin didn't choose to be cold. He was made this way. The next entry was dated weeks later. The handwriting had deteriorated significantly. Day 923. Something is wrong. The healers say the baby is healthy, but I feel it draining me, taking more than it should. Lisara visited today. She smiled at me with those cold eyes and said, the vow always collects its due. I think the baby isn't just Saurin's heir. I think it's payment. The final entry was barely legible. Day 931. If anyone finds this, know that I didn't die of sickness. The Crimson Vow requires sacrifice. A life for a life. Saurin's father paid with his sanity. Saurin paid with his heart. And I'm paying with everything. If someone comes after me, someone brave enough to love him despite everything, tell them the truth. Give them a chance I never had. The entry ended there. Azenor closed the journal, her whole body cold. Lady Mireille died in childbirth, Helene said quietly. Along with the baby, they said it was complications, natural causes. Her voice hardened. But I was there. I saw the black veins spreading across her skin. I heard her screaming about fire in her blood. That wasn't natural, Highness. That was magic. Dark magic. The kind that takes what it's owed. Does Saurin know? I don't think so. Not the full truth. His father arranged the Crimson Vow when Saurin was still a boy. Whatever bargain was struck, I don't think Saurin understands the complete price. Helene met her eyes. But you need to understand it. Because if you bond with him, if you carry his air, the same thing might happen to you. Azenor stood in silence, the journal heavy in her hands. Everything she thought she understood had just transformed. Saurin wasn't cold by choice. He had been mutilated, his very capacity for love carved out of him by his own father. And the women who bonded with him paid the price. I need to speak with him, she said finally. Highness, I don't think... Now. She found Saurin in his private study, bent over documents by candlelight. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Azenor, it's late. She held up the journal. Tell me about the Crimson Vow. The truth this time. His face went blank, that careful, practiced emptiness she was beginning to recognize as his armor. Where did you get that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that your previous Luna wrote about black veins and fire in her blood. She wrote that the vow takes payment. Azenor stepped closer. Am I payment, Saurin? Is that what this is? No. The word came out sharp, almost angry. That's not... He stopped, pressing his palms against the desk as if steadying himself. Sit down. Please. She sat. Saurin was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. My father believed that love was weakness. He watched his own father nearly destroy the kingdom over a woman, started wars, emptied the treasury, executed loyal advisors who dared question his obsession. When my father took the throne, he swore that would never happen again. He moved to the window, his back to her. The Crimson Vow was his solution, a blood pact with an ancient power, older than the moon goddess, older than the wolf spirits. In exchange for immunity to love's influence, the pact demanded sacrifice. My father gave his capacity for mercy. He became ruthless, efficient, feared. Saurin's voice dropped. And when I came of age, he made me take the same vow, except I gave something different. Your ability to love. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. I was 17. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. I just wanted my father to stop looking at me like I was weak. He turned to face her. In the candlelight, he looked younger somehow, wounded. By the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. And Mireille? Pain crossed his features, or the memory of pain, perhaps. I didn't know the vow would affect her. I didn't know it would take... He stopped. She deserved better. A husband who could love her. A child who wouldn't cost her everything. But you're still bound to it. The vow is still active. Yes. Azenor felt something transform in her chest. Not sympathy exactly. It was too complicated for that. But understanding. You chose me at that ceremony because you thought you couldn't love me, she said slowly. A rejected mate from a disgraced bloodline. Someone you'd never develop feelings for. Yes. But your wolf rejected the rejection anyway. My wolf doesn't understand politics, or vows, or consequences. His hand went to his chest. It only knows that you're its other half. It's been trying to tear itself out of me to find you ever since that day." Azenor stood and crossed the room until she was standing directly before him. This close, she could see the faint tremor in his hands. The exhaustion carved into his features. "I'm not Mireille," she said quietly. "I'm not going to die bearing your heir." "You can't know that." "No, but I know that I'm not doing this blindly anymore." She held up the journal. "I know what the vow is. I know what it costs. And I'm choosing to stay anyway." Something flickered in his eyes. "Why?" "Because you didn't choose to be this way, and because I meant what I said before. I'll take cold over cruelty. Every time." Saurin stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and touched her hand. His fingers were cold, unnaturally so, but the touch was gentle. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time he'd touched her willingly, and despite everything, despite the vow and the danger and the certain knowledge that this path led somewhere dark, Azenor felt something bloom in her chest. Something warm and unfamiliar. Something she hadn't felt in years. The days before the bonding ceremony passed in a blur of preparations. 9 days became 5, then 3. Fittings for ceremonial gowns, lessons in royal protocol, meetings with advisors who looked at her with barely concealed disdain. Azenor endured it all with quiet determination. But the nights belonged to Saurin. It started the evening after their conversation in his study. He appeared at her chambers, claiming he needed to discuss ceremonial details. But the details took only minutes, and somehow he stayed for hours. They talked about nothing important at first: the weather, the food, the peculiarities of palace life. But gradually, the conversations deepened. He told her about his childhood, about a father who saw affection as weakness and punished any display of it, about a mother who died when he was young, leaving him with only fragments of memory, the scent of lavender, a soft voice singing, arms that held him without demanding anything in return. "I think that's why the vow worked so completely," he admitted one night. They were sitting by the fire in her chambers, a respectful distance between them that had somehow shrunk over the past week. "I barely remembered what love felt like anyway. Giving it up was like surrendering something I'd already lost." "But you remember now," Azenor said. "Otherwise, you wouldn't know what you're missing." He looked at her, and for a moment the mask slipped. She saw the grief beneath, the loneliness, the years of isolation wrapped in cold armor because he had no other choice. "Some nights I dream about it," he said quietly, "what it might feel like. To look at someone and feel your chest expand, to want to protect them not because of duty, but because their happiness matters more than your own." He shook his head. "But they're just dreams. When I wake, there's only nothing." Azenor reached out before she could stop herself, her fingers brushing his arm. He flinched. Not from disgust, but from surprise, as if he'd forgotten what casual touch felt like. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what your father did to you. Don't be. It made me an effective king. It made you a lonely one." He didn't deny it. The following nights continued the same way. He would arrive with some excuse, stay for hours, and leave only when dawn approached. They never touched beyond those accidental brushes, never crossed any line that could be called improper. But something was building between them nonetheless. Azenor found herself thinking about him during the day, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to nightfall with an anticipation that frightened her. She was falling in love with him. The realization struck her during a fitting the day before the ceremony. She was standing on a pedestal while seamstresses adjusted her gown, and her mind drifted to Saurin, to the way his eyes softened when he talked about his mother, to the dry humor that emerged when he forgot to be guarded, to the careful way he held his teacup as if afraid of breaking it. She was in love with a man who couldn't love her back. Highness? The seamstress was staring at her. Are you well? You've gone quite pale. I'm fine, Azenor lied. Just tired. That night, Saurin arrived later than usual. He looked troubled, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. What's wrong? Azenor asked immediately. He hesitated, then sat heavily in his usual chair. Vandress has been making alliances, quiet ones. He's been meeting with the border lords, offering them concessions I can't match. He's preparing to challenge you. Yes, he's been waiting for this opportunity for years. A weakened king, a controversial queen, an ancient vow that might kill us both. Saurin laughed bitterly. He probably thanks the goddess every night for his good fortune. What will you do? Survive. His storm-colored gaze found hers. Produce an heir before he can make his move. Present the court with a unified front that leaves no opening for challenge. And if the vow takes me the way it took Mireille? Saurin went still. It won't. You can't know that. I've been researching. The vow's hunger can be satisfied other ways. There are old texts, forbidden ones that describe alternative payments. He leaned forward. I won't let it take you, Azenor. Whatever else I can't give you, I can give you that promise. She studied him, this complicated man with his cold exterior and his hidden wounds. Why do you care? If you can't love me, why does it matter whether I live or die? The question hung between them. Saurin opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. For the first time since she'd known him, he seemed genuinely lost for words. I don't know, he finally admitted. I shouldn't care. The vow should make it impossible. But when I think about you dying... He stopped, pressing a hand to his chest. My wolf howls. My chest aches. I can't breathe properly. He looked at her with something like amazement. I don't understand it. The vow took my ability to love, but something is still there. Something that feels like... Like what? He shook his head. I don't know what to call it. But it's real. And it's growing. Azenor's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. She knew she should be cautious, should protect herself from hoping for something impossible. But she'd spent her whole life being cautious, and where had it gotten her? The ceremony is tomorrow, she said quietly. After we bond, things will change. We'll be connected in ways neither of us fully understands. She held his gaze. Are you sure you want this? Not just for politics, or heirs, or survival. Are you sure you want me? Saurin was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the space between them and took her hand. His fingers were still cold, but the grip was sure. I'm sure, he said. I've been sure since the moment my wolf first scented you in that hall. Even when I rejected you, even when I tried to convince myself it was the right thing to do, some part of me knew. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You were always meant to be mine, Azenor. I was just too much of a coward to accept it. She should have pulled away, should have protected her heart from a man who openly admitted he couldn't love her. Instead, she leaned closer. Then let's survive this together, she whispered. Whatever the vow demands, whatever your brother plans, whatever the court thinks of my bloodline, we face it together. Something altered in his expression, not warmth exactly. He still wasn't capable of that, but something adjacent, something that looked almost like devotion. Together, he agreed. When he left that night just before dawn, he paused at the door and looked back at her. Azenor. Yes? Whatever happens after the ceremony, whatever changes or doesn't change. He seemed to struggle with the words. I want you to know that you're not payment. You're not a political arrangement. You're... He stopped, frustrated with his own limitations. You're more. I don't know how to explain it better than that. But you're more. Then he was gone. Azenor sat alone in the growing morning light, her hand still tingling where he'd touched her, her heart full of something she'd never expected to feel again. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, beautiful hope. The morning of the bonding ceremony arrived with clear skies and a full moon still visible on the horizon. The entire kingdom had gathered to witness the event. Nobles packed the cathedral, commoners lined the streets, and somewhere in the crowd, enemies watched and waited. Azenor stood before her mirror while Helene made final adjustments to her gown. The dress was magnificent, silver silk that caught the light like water, delicate embroidery depicting wolves running through moonlit forests, a train that would sweep behind her like a river of starlight. She looked like a queen. "You're beautiful, Highness," Helene said softly. "I'm terrified." "That's normal." Helene squeezed her hand. "But you're also brave. Braver than you know." The ceremony itself was ancient and elaborate. Azenor walked the long aisle of the cathedral alone, just as she'd done during the presentation. But this time, the whispers were different. Not hostile, exactly, but watchful, waiting to see what would happen. Saurin stood at the altar, dressed in formal black with silver accents that matched her gown. He looked healthier than he had in weeks, color in his cheeks, strength in his posture. Her acceptance of the bond had been healing him slowly, but today would complete the process, or destroy them both. The High Priestess began the ceremony, invoking the moon goddess and the ancient wolf spirits. Azenor barely heard the words. Her entire focus was on Saurin, on the steady gray of his eyes, on the slight upturn of his lips when their gazes met. "Do you, Saurin Valdric, Alpha King of Thornhaven, accept this woman as your bonded mate, your Luna Queen, your other half in this life and all lives to come?" "I do." His voice was strong, certain. "And do you, Azenor of House Valdric, accept this man as your bonded mate, your Alpha King, your other half in this life and all lives to come?" "I do." "Then let the bond be sealed with blood and blessing." The priestess produced a ceremonial knife, silver, ancient, its blade carved with runes. She drew it across Saurin's palm first, then Azenor's. The pain was sharp but brief. "Join your hands. Let your blood mingle. Let your souls recognize what the goddess has already decreed." Azenor placed her bleeding palm against Saurin's. The moment their blood touched, she felt it. A rush of sensation unlike anything she'd experienced. His emotions flooded into her. Determination, protectiveness, and beneath it all, something vast and hungry and desperate. His wolf. She could feel it now, pressing against the bond, recognizing her with fierce joy. It had been waiting for this moment, suffering for this moment, refusing to accept anyone else. "Mine," it seemed to say. Finally, mine. And beneath the wolf's hunger, beneath Saurin's careful control, she felt something else. Something he probably didn't even know was there, the faintest ember of warmth. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever, but the potential for it. The place where love should be, scarred over by the vow but not completely dead. Just dormant, just waiting. The priestess wrapped their joined hands in silver ribbon. "By the power of the moon goddess and the blessing of the ancient spirits, I pronounce you bonded. Alpha and Luna, king and queen, two souls made one." The cathedral erupted in cheers, genuine ones this time, or at least well-performed ones. Saurin's grip tightened on her hand, and when she looked at him, she saw awe in his expression. "I can feel you," he whispered, "inside me. I've never—" He stopped, overwhelmed. "Is this what it's supposed to be like?" "I think so. It's extraordinary." For one perfect moment, everything was right. They were bonded. They were together. The vow hadn't claimed her. The ceremony was complete. They had won. Then Vandress began to clap. The sound was slow, mocking, cutting through the celebration like a blade. The crowd fell silent as he stepped forward, that wolf's smile spreading across his face. "Beautiful," he said, truly touching. The cursed king and his hollow bride, bound together by desperation and duty. He turned to address the crowd. "But I wonder if anyone has asked the important question. What happens now?" "This isn't the time, Vandress," Saurin growled. "Oh, but it is. The perfect time, actually." Vandress produced a scroll from his coat. "You see, I've been doing some research of my own, into the Crimson Vow, into what our dear father really agreed to when he bargained with the Shadowborn." The name sent a chill through the cathedral. The Shadowborn were legend, ancient beings of pure darkness who traded in souls and suffering. No one bargained with them. No one was fool enough to try. Except, apparently, the former king. "The vow is complex," Vandress continued, pacing like a predator. "Our father traded his mercy. Saurin traded his capacity for love, but there's a clause neither of them understood. A failsafe, you might call it." His eyes found Azanor's. "If the king ever develops feelings despite the vow, if he ever begins to love someone, the Shadowborn collect everything, not just the emotion, the soul itself." The blood drained from Saurin's face. "You're lying." "Am I? Look inside yourself, brother. Feel the bond you just created. Feel whatever pathetic scrap of emotion you've been nurturing for your new bride." Vandress smiled. "And then tell me you don't feel it. The shadow, the hunger, the price coming due." Azanor tightened her grip on Saurin's hand and felt him trembling. Across their connection, she sensed his terror, his realization. "Saurin," she whispered. "What is he talking about?" "I didn't know." His voice was raw. "I swear I didn't know. I thought the vow just prevented love. I didn't know it would—" He stopped, gasping, his free hand flying to his chest. "Saurin!" He fell to his knees. Via the mate link, Azanor felt what he felt, something cold and terrible moving inside him. Something that had been sleeping, waiting, and was now waking up because he had dared to feel something he wasn't supposed to feel, because he had begun to love her. "No," she breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. "No, no, no." "The Shadowborn are patient," Vandress said, watching with satisfied calm. "They don't care about politics or timing, they only care about payment. And my dear brother just defaulted on his debt." He spread his hands. "When he dies, and he will die, within days if not hours, the throne passes to me. No challenges required. No blood spilled. Just the natural consequence of our father's bargain." Saurin was convulsing now, his skin going gray, his eyes rolling back. Azanor could feel the bond between them straining, tearing, as something tried to rip him away from her. "Help him!" she screamed at the crowd. "Someone help him!" But no one moved. They were frozen, terrified, watching their king die before their eyes. Only Lisara stepped forward, her cold smile never wavering. "I told you, sweetheart, the vow always collects its due." She leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You should have stayed in your little village. Now you'll get to watch him die, and know it's all because he was foolish enough to love you." The darkness was spreading through the bond now. Azanor could feel it reaching for her too, trying to claim whatever connection they'd built. And through the agony and terror, one thought burned clear in her mind. "I will not let them have him." Azanor's mind raced as Saurin convulsed in her arms. The darkness spreading through their bond was cold, colder than anything she'd ever felt, and hungry in a way that defied description. It wanted to consume everything, not just Saurin's soul, but the connection between them. The love that had begun to grow despite every obstacle. "I will not let them have him." The thought crystallized into certainty. She didn't know how she would stop this. She didn't know if it was even possible. but she refused to kneel here and watch him die. "There has to be a way," she said, looking up at the frozen crowd. "The Shadowborn made a bargain. Bargains can be renegotiated. Someone here must know something." Silence. The nobles stared at her with a mixture of pity and fear. No one wanted to involve themselves in matters of dark magic. Then a voice spoke from the back of the cathedral. "There is a way." The crowd parted to reveal an old woman Azenor didn't recognize. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes milky with age. But she moved with purpose, her walking stick tapping against the stone floor as she approached. The guards tried to stop her, but she walked past them as if they weren't there, as if she had every right to be in this sacred place. "Who are you?" Vandress demanded. "Someone who remembers what your family has tried so hard to forget." The old woman stopped before Azenor, studying her with those clouded eyes. "You're hollow blood. Daughter of Thornhaven and Ilsa, granddaughter of Brenneth the Disgraced." "Yes," Azenor said. "What of it? Do you know why your bloodline was really destroyed?" The old woman's voice carried through the silent cathedral. "Do you know what crime your grandfather supposedly committed? Treason. He plotted against the crown. Lies." The word cracked like a whip. Brenneth of the Hollow was the last of the Moonwalkers, the priest warriors who served the goddess directly, who held the only power capable of countering the Shadowborn. She pointed a gnarled finger at Vandress, then at the shadows spreading across Saurin's skin. "Your grandfather discovered what the king was planning, the Crimson Vow, the bargain with darkness. He tried to stop it, and for that, he was executed, his bloodline branded as traitors, his knowledge buried." Azenor's world tilted. "That's impossible. My family has no magic, no power. We're just what? Survivors? Outcasts? The goddess's chosen, hiding in plain sight because that was the only way to survive?" The old woman grasped Azenor's hand, the one still bleeding from the bonding ceremony. "The power is in your blood, child. It always has been. Your grandfather's gift passed to your father, who never knew how to use it, and from him to you." "I don't understand. How do I?" "The Moonwalkers were bound to the goddess the same way wolves are bound to their mates. Through blood, through sacrifice, through love." The old woman's grip tightened. "You've already begun the ritual without knowing it. You bound yourself to a man claimed by shadows. Your blood mingled with his. Your soul reached for his despite knowing the cost." Across the link, Azenor felt Saurin weakening. His heart was slowing. The shadows were winning. "Tell me what to do," she begged. "Call the light. It lives in you, waiting to be woken. But understand, the Shadowborn don't surrender their claims easily. To pull him back from darkness, you'll have to go into it yourself. And there's no guarantee you'll return." Azenor looked down at Saurin. His face was gray now, his breathing shallow. Through their bond, she could feel him slipping away, his consciousness fading into something vast and cold and empty. She thought of everything she'd been through. The rejection, the humiliation, the months of hiding and surviving. She thought of how easy it would be to let go, to protect herself, to walk away and start over somewhere new. Then she thought of the way Saurin had touched her hand in his study, the amazement in his voice when he felt their bond for the first time, the ember of warmth she'd sensed beneath his frozen exterior, the love he wasn't supposed to be capable of feeling, growing anyway because some things were stronger than any vow. "I'll do it," she said. "Azenor, no." Saurin's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes struggling to focus. "Don't. It's not worth. You don't get to decide what's worth it to me." She cupped his face in her hands. "You spent your whole life having choices made for you. Your father chose to take your ability to love. Your brother chose to let you die. But I'm making my own choice. And I choose you." She kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fierce, desperate, pouring everything she felt into the contact. And as their lips met, she reached deep inside herself, searching for the power the old woman claimed was there. "Please," she prayed. "Goddess, if you're real, if you're listening, please help me save him." Something answered. It started as a warmth in her chest, spreading outward through her veins like sunlight after a long winter. She felt it flowing through the bond, chasing the darkness, pushing back against the shadows that were trying to claim Saurin's soul. The Shadowborn fought back. She felt their rage, their hunger, their ancient claim on what had been promised to them. They showed her visions. Saurin's body cold and lifeless, herself alone and broken, a kingdom falling into chaos and war. They whispered promises of power, of revenge, of everything she could have if she just let go. She refused. Instead, she pushed deeper, past the darkness, past the visions, past the cold. She found the ember she'd sensed during the bonding, that tiny spark of love that had survived everything, and she wrapped her light around it, feeding it, protecting it, helping it grow. "Come back to me," she called through the bond. "Come back, Saurin. I'm here. I'm not letting go." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then she felt it. His consciousness, battered and fading, reaching for her light. His wolf, howling with desperate hope. His soul, clinging to the thread she'd thrown him like a drowning man clinging to a rope. The shadows screamed. The sound was audible now, filling the cathedral, making the walls shake and the candles flicker. The nobles fell back, covering their ears. Even Vandress retreated, his smug expression replaced by genuine fear. "What is she doing?" he shouted. "This is impossible." "It's not impossible," the old woman said calmly. "It's justice, long overdue." Azenor felt the moment the shadows released their claim. It was like a chain snapping, a weight lifting, a door slamming shut. The darkness recoiled, shrieking, and fled back to whatever abyss had spawned it. And in its wake, light remained. Azenor opened her eyes. She was lying on the cathedral floor, Saurin's head cradled in her lap. Her body ached in ways she couldn't describe, and she was fairly certain she couldn't stand even if she tried. But Saurin was breathing. Color was returning to his cheeks, and when his eyes opened, they were clear. "Azenor?" His voice was hoarse but strong. "I'm here." He sat up slowly, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Then he pressed one palm to his chest, his expression shifting to amazement. "The cold," he said. "It's gone. I can feel—" He stopped, overwhelmed. "I can feel everything." The bond conveyed what he meant, the barrier that had blocked his emotions, the scar tissue left by the crimson vow. It was healing. Not completely, not yet. But the damage was no longer permanent. The vow was broken. "How?" Saurin asked, looking at her with something that might have been awe. "How did you do that?" Before Azenor could answer, Vandress's voice cut through the moment. "This changes nothing." He was standing near the altar, his face twisted with fury. In his hand was a ceremonial dagger, its blade blackened with some kind of poison. "The vow may be broken, but you're still weak. Both of you." He advanced slowly. "And witnesses can be silenced." "Vandress." Saurin started to rise, but his legs buckled. The battle with the Shadowborn had drained him completely. "You should have died," Vandress snarled. "You should have died years ago when Father made you take that vow. But you just kept surviving, kept ruining everything. Well, not anymore." He raised the dagger, and a silver blur slammed into him from the side. Helene, the small maid who had shown Azenor the truth about Mireille. Except she wasn't merely a maid anymore. She moved like a trained warrior, wrestling the dagger from Vandress's grip and pinning him to the ground with a knee on his spine. Lady Murray asked me to watch over whoever might come after her, Helene said coldly. In the weeks before she gave birth, she knew something was wrong. She made me swear. Said someone would come who could break the curse, someone who would need protection. She looked at Azenor. She meant you. The cathedral guards finally moved, surrounding Vandress and hauling him to his feet. He struggled uselessly, his face purple with rage. This isn't over, he spat. The Shadowborn will return. They always collect what they're owed. Perhaps, the old woman said, stepping forward. But they'll find their claim contested. The Moonwalkers have returned. And we have very long memories. She placed a hand on Azenor's head, and something passed between them. Knowledge, power, understanding. A lifetime of training compressed into a single moment. The rest you'll learn in time, the old woman said. But know this. You are not hollow, child. You never were. You are filled with light. And now, the whole kingdom will see it. Vandress was dragged away, still screaming threats and curses. Lisara, Azenor noticed, had vanished completely, fled into the crowd the moment the tide turned. We'll find her, Saurin said, following her gaze. He was standing now, leaning heavily on a guard but upright. Her and anyone else who conspired with my brother. Later. Azenor tried to stand and immediately swayed. Saurin caught her, pulling her against his chest. Via the mate link she felt his gratitude, his awe, his overwhelming relief. And beneath it all, growing stronger by the moment. Love. Real love. Unblocked. Unfiltered. Finally free. You saved me, he murmured against her hair. You would have done the same. I would have tried. I'm not sure I would have succeeded. He pulled back to look at her face. You are extraordinary, Azenor. Absolutely extraordinary. For the first time since the ceremony began, she smiled. 3 months had passed since the bonding ceremony. 3 months of recovery and revelation and slow, careful healing. The kingdom had changed more in those months than in the previous decade. Vandress sat in the dungeons awaiting trial, his conspirators rounded up one by one. The charges were numerous: treason, attempted regicide, conspiracy with dark powers. The penalty would be severe. Lisara had been found trying to flee across the northern border. She was now in a separate cell. Her beauty faded to pallor, her confidence shattered. She had confessed everything in exchange for her life, how she had known about the Crimson Vow's true nature, how she had worked with Vandress to ensure Saurin never found a mate he could love, how she had planned to be queen herself once the king was dead. The court had been horrified, and for the first time in memory, the whispers about the Hollow Queen had turned from scorn to admiration. She saved him, they said. She broke the curse. Moonwalker blood, the goddess's own power. Perhaps the Hollow Ones were never cursed at all. Perhaps we were the ones who were wrong. Azenor found the change disorienting. She had spent so long being despised that acceptance felt foreign, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But slowly, carefully, she was learning to trust it. The old woman, Vesna, she'd eventually shared her name, had stayed at the palace to help Azenor understand her heritage. The Moonwalkers had been a sacred order, warrior priests who served as the goddess's hands in the mortal world. They could channel divine light, banish darkness, heal wounds both physical and spiritual. The knowledge had been suppressed for generations, the bloodlines scattered and hidden. But some things couldn't be destroyed, only dormant. You're the first in 4 generations to awaken the gift fully, Vesna told her. Your grandfather had glimpses. Your father had dreams he couldn't explain. But you embraced it completely, without hesitation, to save someone you loved. What does that mean for the future? It means the Shadowborn will never again find easy purchase in Thornhaven. Their bargains are broken, their claims void. The darkness your king's father invited in has been driven out. Vesna smiled. And it means, goddess willing, that others may awaken as well. There are more Moonwalker descendants than anyone realizes. They just need someone to show them the way. Azenor had begun that work already. With Saurin's blessing and resources, she was establishing a sanctuary in the valley below Thornhaven, a place where those with dormant gifts could come to learn, to grow, to understand their heritage, without fear. They were calling it the Hollow Light, a name Azenor had chosen herself. What had once been a slur would become a beacon. And she had Saurin. The changes in him were remarkable. The Crimson Vow's hold had been completely severed, and his emotional capacity was slowly returning. It wasn't instantaneous. Decades of damage couldn't heal overnight. But every day he felt a little more, laughed a little easier, touched her a little more freely. The cold that had lived in his bones was fading, replaced by warmth he barely knew how to handle. "I woke up happy this morning," he told her one night, lying beside her in their shared chambers. "Just happy, for no reason. Is that normal?" Azenor laughed, pressing closer to him. "Yes, that's normal. It's strange. Good strange. But strange." He turned to look at her, his eyes soft in the candlelight. "I spent so long feeling nothing. Now there's so much. I don't know what to do with it all." "You learn. Day by day. We learn together." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. The kiss deepened, turned hungry. Via the mate link, she felt his desire, and beneath it, his love. Vast and overwhelming and still growing. "I love you," he said against her mouth. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. I love you completely. More than I thought I was capable of. More than I knew was possible." "I know," she whispered. "I can feel it." "And you're not afraid? That it's too much?" She pulled back to look at him properly. "Saurin, I spent months knowing you couldn't love me. I accepted that, prepared myself for it, and told myself it would be enough. And now you're asking if I'm afraid you love me too much?" She laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "I've never been less afraid of anything in my life." He pulled her close, and they lost themselves in each other. Later, as dawnlight crept through the windows, Saurin spoke again. "There's something I need to tell you." Azenor propped herself up on one elbow. "What is it?" "The healers confirmed it yesterday. They wanted to wait for certainty before informing us." He placed his hand on her stomach, his expression tender and terrified and overjoyed all at once. "You're pregnant, Azenor. We're going to have a child." For a moment she couldn't breathe. Then joy crashed over her like a wave. "Truly, truly." His hand moved in gentle circles. "A daughter, they think. Though it's early to be certain. A daughter. Their daughter. A child who would grow up loved by both parents, protected by light, free from the curses that had haunted previous generations. She'll never know the cold," Azenor said softly. "She'll never know what it feels like to be hollow or rejected or alone." "No, she won't." Saurin's voice was fierce. "I'll make sure of it. Whatever it takes. Whatever I have to do. Our children will never suffer the way we did." Azenor laid her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong and steady and warm. "I used to think my bloodline was a curse," she said. "That being hollow meant being empty, worthless, destined for nothing but suffering. My father died believing that. My mother gave up because of it." She lifted her head to meet his eyes. "But it wasn't a curse at all. It was a gift, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for someone who needed saving. You did more than save me. You changed everything." Saurin sat up, drawing her with him. Through the window, they could see the kingdom spreading out before them, the city waking, the harbor filling with ships, the forest stretching green and endless toward the horizon. "Because of you, the Shadowborn have no hold here. The old hatreds are dying, the moonwalkers will return, and with them, a power that can stand against any darkness. Because of us, Azenor corrected, you had to choose to love me despite the cost. You had to fight for our bond even when it was killing you. I almost didn't. Those months after the rejection, when my wolf was tearing itself apart, I could have chosen to die. I thought about it more than once. He shook his head. But something kept pulling me back. Some instinct that said you were worth fighting for, even if I couldn't feel why. Your wolf knew. My wolf is smarter than I am. Azenor laughed, and Saurin smiled. A real smile. Unguarded and bright. The kind he'd never been capable of before. Word had even reached her sister Neve in the eastern provinces. The cruel lord who'd bought her had been stripped of his title, one of Vandress's conspirators, and Neve was finally free. She would arrive at the palace within the month. For the first time in years, the remnants of the Hollow bloodline would be together again. Not as outcasts, but as family. I have something for you, Saurin said. He reached into the drawer beside the bed and withdrew a small velvet box. It's not the crown. That comes later, at the formal coronation. But I wanted to give you something now. Something personal. He opened the box. Inside was a pendant. A crescent moon carved from silver, with a single diamond at its heart that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. It belonged to my mother, Saurin said quietly. The only thing of hers I managed to save. I never thought I'd have someone to give it to. Someone I'd want to give it to. He lifted it carefully. May I? Azenor nodded, unable to speak. He fastened the pendant around her neck, then leaned back to look at her. Perfect, he murmured. You look like the queen you are. She touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her collarbone. I'll treasure it always. I know you will. He took her hands in his. Azenor, when I stood in that hall and rejected you, I thought I was saving myself, protecting my heart by pretending I didn't have one. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. His grip tightened. You taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in existence. Strong enough to break ancient curses, to defeat darkness, to heal wounds that seemed beyond repair. Saurin, let me finish. He raised her hands to his lips. I will spend the rest of my life making amends for that day. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because loving you isn't an obligation or a duty or a curse. It's the greatest gift I've ever received, and I will be grateful for it until my last breath. Azenor was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling too, smiling so wide it hurt. I love you, she said. I love your wolf and your stubbornness and your terrible habit of working through dinner. I love the way you're learning to laugh again. I love that you're trying so hard to be better than you were. Only because of you. Because of us, she said again. Together. He kissed her tears away, one by one. Then he pulled her close and held her as the sun rose fully over Thornhaven, flooding their chambers with golden light. Outside, the kingdom was waking to a new day, a new era. The cursed king and his hollow bride had become something different. A blessed king and his luminous queen, bound not by contracts or desperation, but by love freely chosen and fiercely defended. And in the months and years that followed, the story spread far beyond Thornhaven's borders. They called it many things, a fairy tale, a legend, a miracle. But those who knew the truth understood it was simpler than that. It was two broken people who had found each other in darkness and chosen, against all odds, to walk into the light together. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and they mean more than you know.